Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here if it's okay. I got the permissions. Hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Ernesto, oh, there you go. You're in presenter view now.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ross to kick us off.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for your lunch at Learn. We are going to talk about three general topics today. The first is privacy. I'm going to give you a brief, you want to go to the agenda, Ernesto?
Sure.
I'm going to provide a brief review of PHI and PII and the de-identification of PHI. Ernesto is going to talk about research security, and Aaron is going to talk about the export controls and bulk data transfer rule. We're going to skip around in the agenda a little bit. I'm going to have Aaron go after I do, and then Ernesto will follow up with the research security. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So first of all, I wanted to give you definitions. I'm sure you're all familiar with these. The definition of PHI, which refers to any individually identifiable health information that's held by a covered entity, like an insurance company or a healthcare provider, and it relates to a patient's past, present, or future physical or mental health, the provision of healthcare or payment for healthcare. So it's health information that can be linked to a specific person. And then PII, or personally identifiable information, is any data that can be used to identify any person, either directly or indirectly. And it includes information like social security number, a name, address, birth date, gender. And in general, the way to think about it is that PII is kind of a more broad data set, and PHI is a subset of PAI. It's specifically related to health information that's defined by HIPAA. You want to go to the next slide? So de-identification of protected health information is the act of removing or obscuring identifiers from health information so that it's not any longer able to identify an individual. The process enables the use and disclosure of health information for purposes like research and public health activities without violating the HIPAA regulations. And next slide. Under HIPAA, there's two methods of de-identification. One is called the safe harbor method, which you're probably all familiar with. It involves removing 18 specific identifiers that are outlined in the HIPAA privacy rule. And in a minute, I'll go over all those identifiers. And the other procedure is called the expert determination. And it's where you have a qualified statistician or expert determine the risk of re-identification, that it's very low risk based on generally accepted statistical principles. And the next slide. So here are the 18 identifiers that are defined by HIPAA that need to be removed in order for PHI to be considered de-identified. I won't go through all of them in detail, but you can see that there's some very obvious ones like address, name, telephone numbers, email addresses, social security number, medical record number, and then there's some less direct identifiers like license plate numbers, web URLs, internet protocols, the address, finger or voice prints. So all of those identifiers have to be removed in order for PHI to be considered de-identified. And once they're removed, if you remove all 18 identifiers, PHI is no longer considered PHI and it's not subject to the HIPAA regulations. There's last category on this slide indicates that there's any other characteristic that could uniquely identify an individual. And you want to go to the next slide, Ernesto? And I got some information from UCLA Health privacy group, and they indicated that they consider these other characteristics that could uniquely identify an individual, including an IRB or research studied identifier, clinical trial record number, a barcode, revealing occupation, unique condition, or a publicized clinical event. So if you have any of those additional identifiers, UCLA Health considers those to be part of the 18 identifiers that you need to remove in order to de-identify PHI. And the next slide. And one last category of information I wanted to just mention that could be considered an identifier is location data. So if you're collecting information for your research that involves latitude and longitude, IP addresses, physical addresses, or points of interest, you could be gathering information that could identify an individual. It depends on the context, but just I wanted to point it out because we have had research in the past that have gathered specific information like this, and it could lead to the identification of individuals. And that's all I kind of wanted to review in terms of de-identification and PHI. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to talk about export controls and the bulk transfer rule. And you can probably go to the next slide.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ross. And thank you again, Moore and OHRPP for having us here or having us back here. I was looking through my email and actually realized that I presented, I think, at the same Learn at Lunch in 2021 on the topic of export controls specifically, which is not something that we're going to get very much into today. I did just want to open with a slide that sets the context a little bit more about the research security environment at UCLA, and emphasize a couple of points. I think one is that international collaboration is of utmost importance to UCLA and to research in general. That's been reiterated by the chancellor, the vice chancellor for research, and the UC president. And it's obvious that research doesn't stop at our borders. And so I think holistically as a campus with multiple units that have multiple responsibilities, we are trying to address certain aspects of research security, of which the bulk data rule that I'll be speaking about is one of them. But this really is a slide to kind of lay out that the sort of safeguarding of research that we do involves many different units. I see Tracy Frazier here today from OCGA. That's a critical unit for our funded research, our sponsored projects and disclosures. It is really addressing multiple frameworks at the same time. And that means, of course, that one project that we undertake as university can be covered by multiple frameworks and need input from a lot of different areas. So I put a box in the middle here just to kind of lay out a few different areas. Cybersecurity is one, travel security is another, export controls and sanctions, which is where we're coming from my area, sponsor research, and then even things outside of research, looking at sales and service activities can be grouped in with the sort of research security topic, which has been an increasingly complex topic for higher education in the last few years and has really accelerated under the current administration. And as some of our federal sponsors and other enforcement agencies are getting their head around what they would like to see from us. They're increasingly interested and in some cases concerned with international engagements that we undertake or that universities undertake in the regular course of business. And we really want to be here to help guide folks in the right direction and ensure that our university and our work is done both legally, but also in a way that continues advancing the sort of important research that we do. So these are just a few of the different areas that, again, we're not going to cover today, or I'm not going to talk about today, but if you have any questions on these, you can go ahead and email me, or we have a shared inbox for research security that we'll share at the end of the presentation, and we would be sure to point you in the right place. So, they're just grouped here, obviously sharing research materials with third parties, with international entities. That can be something that would touch on research security. That's why we have colleagues in TDG, for example, that would help us with data use agreements or material transfer agreements, ensuring we have the right terms and conditions in place, that everybody is transparent and understanding of what's being shared and to whom and for what reason. Restricted party screening. A lot of you may be aware of visual compliance, which is a tool that we use at UCLA to check all of the various federal lists that the government puts out there for restricted or not debarred in the sense of healthcare that we sometimes think of, but entities and individuals to whom there are restrictions about sharing certain technologies or data or information. Looking at our international visitors and folks that are visiting the campus, either that's academic personnel or temporary visitors that may be here. and then some of the reporting and foreign talent recruitment questions that come up as well. Disclosures, that's another area of research security. And then in the middle of the screen here, um, it this is where it gets very ugly when we look at all the frameworks together to try to come up with a list of countries of concern, because I'm going to use that term and talk about a certain set of countries that are countries of concern, but specifically for the DOJ data rule. But the two that are most important to talk about here for this group, there is a group of countries, in the first bullet point there, China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Those are subject to a UC-wide mandate from the Office of the President that requires an enhanced review and approval for some institution-wide engagements. And that group of countries is not the same as the group of countries in the second bullet point, which are those that are the focus of this DOJ bulk transfer rule. So that's China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela. There's some overlap, but it's not exactly the same, and we'll see those countries once again on another slide here. Next slide, Ernesto. So today I'm going to talk about a new Department of Justice rule that regulates how UCLA can share data about US persons or some other types of data like government data with international entities and individuals. The name of this rule is there, preventing access to Americans' bulk sensitive personal data and United States government related data by countries of concern. This was put into place last year, actually a bit suddenly. It was effective on April 8th, 2025, the culmination of a longer process that started in the previous administration. But the purpose of this rule is, in effect, to guard against the national security risks that would be posed by foreign adversaries who may be able to access large volumes of US personal data or US government related data. And the kind of risks that are called out are that there could be potential misuse of that information. So it could be for straight up espionage purposes to train AI, to surveil individuals by those countries of concern as DOJ has determined and applied them. So this rule applies to US persons, of which UCLA is a US person, and so are our personnel, including foreign nationals who are here at UCLA as employees or students. They're also considered US persons underneath this rule. They're not considered resident of their country of concern if, again, they're here on campus working and studying as our international colleagues do. Again, it just applies to US persons that could provide access to bulk US sensitive personal data or government related data to covered persons or countries of concern. And again, those countries are China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, North Korea, and Venezuela under this Department of Justice bulk data transfer rule. And next slide, please, Ernesto. So this is where there's a lot. I think this is the busiest slide probably, and I apologize for that, but this is where things start to get very messy with the rule. It's like a lot of other rules that are issued, very detailed. There's a lot of definitions. There's a lot of specific sorts of transactions that are called out and specific data that's called out at different thresholds, which we'll talk about here. There are sections of the rule that talk about prohibited transactions, restricted transactions, and then some exempted transactions. The important takeaway here is that we should not make an assumption that what we're doing falls under the kind of more lax categories, which would be restricted and exempted transactions. I think a lot of higher education institutions are still trying to digest this rule, getting legal input either from outside counsel or inside counsel, and from professional organizations as well. But very broadly, and this isn't all of the data that's included there, especially under the first bullet point, human omic data, it goes into details on what that entails. But the prohibited transactions are data brokerage with countries of concern or covered persons involving bulk covered data at these different thresholds. And I included the thresholds not so you can memorize them and write them down, but more to show that it could be as few as 100 persons. If we're sharing genomic data for as few as 100 US persons, that could trigger this rule, meaning that would be a prohibited transaction. For biometric identifiers, geolocation data, that's up to 1,000 US persons or devices, and then slightly higher to 10,000 US persons for personal health, financial, or identifiers. So I gave an example there of what may be covered, and it's pretty general because it's hard to kind of prescribe out exactly what each scenario may be, depending on what the data is and depending on if there's a financial transaction there. But an example would be just a joint research agreement or arrangement where we're allowing a foreign partner um, typically located in a country of concern, although it does also apply to an individual who could be from a country of concern that's in a third party country, if they're resident in that country of concern. But it's that sort of joint arrangement where that partner gets access to a large data set of genomic, health, or mobility data, as all defined in the rule. All of these have very nice, confusing definitions for us. The second sort of transaction that's described in the rule are restricted transactions. They call out specific agreements that I believe are more geared towards commercial, non-academic institutions that may also be doing data brokerage in terms of business model, so selling data, and that are specific agreements for vendor, employment, and investment agreements that would grant that access. Those are restricted unless there are strict security measures that are put into place. One of those is cybersecurity under CISA requirements, having a compliance program, including proper contract terms to make sure that data doesn't get onwardly sold or shared with a country of concern, and having audits in place. Otherwise, those without having those stringent security measures in place, those restricted transactions are then considered prohibited. And then finally, for the exemptions, some specific exemptions are called out in the rule, but they're very narrow and they're very fact dependent, specific to that transaction. And so generally, just we don't assume that any transaction is exempted without being looked at by somebody for a legal review and then someone from our office from export control as well. And next slide. Thanks. And I'll just end with some of the considerations that are pretty high level, as well as, of course, the penalties, because we have to talk about that as well. But for the considerations, the risk here is on, again, the risk focus is on providing access to covered persons, as is defined here, who are affiliated or located in countries of concern. And that does include, like I said before, certain entities in a third country. So an example would be if we're contracting an IT company that is located in a third party country that's not one of those countries of concern, but then they onwardly share that data or otherwise send that data to one of those countries of concern. The rule applies regardless of de-identification or encryption. So important stuff that Ross just discussed, that doesn't make this data clean if we're still sharing above a certain threshold. And we rely on our units to be looking at terms and conditions to mitigate those risks and to mitigate the onward sharing of information, for example. And that would be done through a material transfer agreement, for example, by negotiated by TDG. And then just the last 2 points here, it's a complex rule. It's new. As I said before, there's lots of defined terms in it. And the limits of the rule and the enforcement of the rule are more or less opaque at this moment. We're not able to really see consistency because there hasn't yet been enforcement as far as we've seen as to what sorts of transactions would be directly exempted or directly impacted. And that's why we always are saying, just assume that it's a prohibited transaction if it's one of those countries of concern, unless we are able to really do an enhanced due diligence review and make sure everything is in order. And just reiterating, I think a point I made at the beginning was that foreign nationals who are studying and working here at UCLA, they're actually considered US persons. So they would be subject to the rule. They wouldn't actually be prohibited as a recipient in a country of concern. They would be subject to the rule just like UCLA, just like all of us that are here working and studying here. Um, so for the penalties, civil penalties up to $368,000, twice the value of the transaction, whichever is greater. And then willful violations can lead to even more than that, up to $1 million, 20 years in prison. Um, One thing I didn't put in here just for space is that the rule is also on a rolling basis. So if we're sharing, let's say genomic data, with a particular entity in a country of concern. One department is sharing, let's say, 10 US person genomic data. Another department is sharing 30, another is sharing 50, another is sharing, another 20 or 30. We may already hit that threshold of 100. So it's on a rolling basis for the calendar year, and adds up across the institution. So it's something we have to be a little bit careful of. The main takeaway here is just please get in touch with our office for engagements that are involving the sort of US person data with those countries of concern, and we can help navigate and take the next steps there. I think that was all I had for my slides, and I will pass it over to Ernesto.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Ross. So when we talk about research security, we're not talking about a single use. It's really about context. Risk is shaped by the kind of data that's involved, who has access to it, what technologies are being used, and how research will ultimately be shared. So from a data sensitivity standpoint, the more sensitive the data is, the more care we need to take in how it's actually managed. From a collaboration standpoint, projects with external or international partners naturally introduce different risks and sharing considerations. The technologies, tools, methods can also affect the risk, especially when we're working in cloud environments or we're with advanced technologies. And lastly, how research is published, disseminated, can also shape the risk associated with research, particularly around intellectual property and compliance. The goal at UCLA is to advance research excellence. It's not to slow it down. We're here to help you make all the great research activities and things you do successful, right? You're not in this alone, and we're here to help you, and we're partners right alongside you, right? The idea is to strike the right balance between supporting innovation while meeting legal, ethical, and security responsibilities. All right. So to kind of highlight how that works, what we've done recently is we've created an intake process that has 5 steps, as you can see here. And Tracy Frazier, Tracy, that's the second time I called your name out here, pretty popular. Um, we have a centralized intake process through ServiceNow where OCGA, TDG, export controls, privacy, we're all included in this to be able to review all the research that comes in. So what happens is the OCGA team or TDG team will send an email, or maybe a PI will send an email to research@ucla.edu, GRC_research at ucla.edu. It turns into a ServiceNow ticket. We review it. We then, on step 2, reach out to the PI and begin to evaluate the data sensitivity. What are the contractual requirements and all the access to kind of go through the scenario and the use case to understand better what's going to be done, how it's affected by the contract, what the sensitivity of the data is, etc. Once we've done that, we can then help assign a protection level in terms of defining what the baseline security and compliance expectations are going to be. And in doing so, we can then decide what the right environment would be, right? So there's a couple of different options that we have. It's the Bruin Cloud, which, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us there. Hopefully this works. So Bruin Cloud is relatively new, I should say. It's not in term, it's been used in the past, but now we've actually formalized it and we've gotten it, we've upgraded it and incorporated it into our process now. And basically what it is, it's an option for researchers that have maybe large data sets, very sensitive we're very sensitive data with requirements that we can't satisfy here locally at UCLA. You now have this option to use to be able to do that. And the benefit of it is threefold. One, it's a discounted price. It's basically a one-stop shop. You go in, you provide the requirements, they build it for you, and you're off and running, right? And lastly, all of that's being supported and all the compliance is being supported within it, along with us, of course, to help you. So it's a really, really good way of making sure that you're able to do what it is that you need to do in a compliant, safe environment at a discounted rate. Now, we're going to share these slides at the end of the presentation. And if you want more information or if you want to start asking more questions with or liaising with the Bruin Cloud team, down here at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a schedule a consultation today, schedule some time, and they will be more than happy to talk to you about this. All right. The other option we have is the HCE. The HCE is a local repository that's actually CMMC 2 level 2 certified, and we're going to be recertifying it this year. It's limited in terms of storage size. So if we can't fit, well, let me take a step back. It's limited in terms of storage size, but the benefit to it is that it's free. It's free to use. If we can fit you in there, we will. And what we do is we create and tailor the environment to whatever research you need, whatever research technologies you need. And you can go in there and perform the research that you need to perform, take out what you need for your paper or whatever it is you're trying to achieve with it. And yeah, you can continue using it. There is no time limit. There's no cost to it. And all you need to do is just reach out to grc@ucla.edu and we can help you get in there if it fits the requirements. And then lastly is an improved alternative environment. This we're actually trying to get away from, but sometimes given the complexity of some of the research that's being performed, some of the tools that are needed, we create a hybrid approach. So there might be a piece of it that you already have built out somewhere in your department, but maybe the sensitive stuff will go into Bruin Cloud or HCE, and then the non-sensitive stuff and additional things that you can do outside of those environments could be done in that approved alternative environment. All right, lastly, once we've selected the environment, we'll go back and coordinate any kind of remediation. So if there are things that we identify we needed to work on, we'll do that. We'll also provide support from a compliance research standpoint. So some of the contracts that we see require ongoing risk assessments and things to follow up on the research from beginning to end, and we'll perform that as well. And we'll work with the PIs and everybody else that's involved with it. Okay, so that's how we perform the research, or excuse me, that's how we intake the research and allow you to execute the research. Now let's talk about breach notification. Under California law and policy 420 requires UCLA to notify affected individuals of unencrypted personal information that is reasonably believed to have been accessed by an unauthorized party. So the first thing you need to do is just report it. If you suspect that it's been personal information, sensitive information, HIPAA, etc., don't attempt to remediate it. Don't attempt to do anything. Just reach out to security@ucla.edu, or I've got the links here for report a security concern, and they will be more than happy to help you get through that. So one of the things that we've done recently in the past 2 years is we created a very robust incident response program. It's probably one of the best ones I've seen. And I've been assessing and creating programs like this for many years, but this is one of the best ones. We test it regularly. We've used it a few times, unfortunately, and it works really, really well. And we've never had any issues with it, up and knock on wood. And it's very well done, and it's something we can quickly get to the heart of the issue with. We got external parties to help us and everything. So it's a great program. If you need it, it's there, it's available, and it's proven to work, right? All right, so what they do is they'll triage the incident. Once you report it, coordinate any required notifications under policy 420 and applicable laws, and support any containment, investigation, recovery. As I mentioned, we have local support as well as third-party support that'll help us do that. And all the required parties are involved: legal, compliance, privacy, et cetera, are all involved to triage it and get through the breach. All right. At this point, I don't have anything else. Ross, I'll turn it back to you to close us out this afternoon.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment, Ernesto, to follow up on your comment about reporting the incidents
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
There are frequently requirements under various data laws that require us to notify individuals or agencies within a specific period of time. So it's very important that we get notified as quickly as possible when there's an incident, either known or suspected, so that we can triage it and see what's going on. And we'll help you manage through the process.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Ross.
Yeah. So with that, I just wanted to provide this information about our contacts. For privacy in my space, you can contact me at privacy@compliance.ucla.edu. Or if you have health-related information and have a specific HIPAA compliance issue, you may contact the compliance office at UCLA Health at compoffice@mednet.ucla.edu. And then there's contact information for the GRC that Ernesto works with or is the director of, and export control information that Aaron Tabor will respond to.
Yeah, from a GRC standpoint, the portal that we've established for assessments and research intake works both for campus as well as health because we share it and we share monthly reporting through it and everything else. So if you have any questions either for the campus or health side, we can certainly take care of it through that. All right. Okay, so one last thing we do, thank you very much, but we also have some helpful IT resources, and we'll share this deck after the presentation. And like I mentioned before, we do have the Bruin Cloud stuff that you guys can review. And as I mentioned before, down at the right-hand side, you can schedule a consultation with them if you have any further questions. Aside from that, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions or how you want to go forward here.
I don't see any questions in the chat. More, is there anything more that we need to do to close this out?
No, last chance for any questions. Anyone have any? All right. Well, thank you all so much for presenting, and thank you to the audience for attending. Really appreciate everyone's participation in this. We really want to make sure that everyone has all the information they need to keep their data secure in all the ways it needs to be kept secure. So thank you so much. And stay tuned for our next Learn at Lunch.